And thanks so much for tuning into the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth. Hopefully you have been encouraged, inspired, challenged through the book of Genesis. We're taking one chapter a day through our daily devotionals. And so hopefully you have been encouraged and inspired through this. We've been talking about God's faithfulness, His promises, and today we're going to be talking about His timing. His timing is perfect, despite what we might think. To give you some context to the chapter we're going to be on, and that's chapter 41. We're talking about Joseph. We're talking about how he was wrongfully accused. We see here from last week that Joseph lived his life with integrity. He had God's character. He stood strong in the face of temptation and did not give in. And through it all, he was wrongfully accused. He was put in prison. God gave him the gift of interpretation of dreams. And a couple of his prison mates had these dreams. Joseph interprets the dreams, and Joseph tells the cupbearer, hey, remember me when you get restored to your position of leadership. Remember me and remember what I did for you. And let's listen to verse 1 of chapter 41, as it now will give us some context of where Joseph is at and what happened to him. Verse 1, when 2 full years had passed. That's a long time in prison, especially when you're there from something that you didn't do. You stayed strong. You held on to God's character, had integrity, honoring God through it all. And you even tried to say, hey, remember me, and nothing had happened. The cupbearer forgot what Joseph had done. And we have to remember here that God's timing is perfect. And if you are in a season of waiting, which most of us are, I believe that everyone is in a season of preparation, that God is preparing us for that next step that He has for us. So in this time that you are in right now, how are you honoring God? How am I honoring God in this season of waiting, in this season of trusting in His timing, in His provision, in His perfection of our faith? How are we honoring God in that season? As all of us will read in chapter 41, we see that God gives him the interpretation, gives Joseph the interpretation of Pharaoh, and how Pharaoh was so astonished that he restores Joseph back to the position of leadership. And he sees him and he says, wow, God's favor is on you. You have God's wisdom. And I want us to see here what Joseph names his son. Now, prior to the famine, Joseph has a couple sons, and listen to what he names his sons. In verse 51 of chapter 41 says, Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, it is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. And the second son, he named him Ephraim and said, it is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. And I think it's important. We don't need to name our sons certain things, but I think it's important as we talk about how we have to remember God's faithfulness. And obviously with his sons, naming his sons and understanding the meaning of them, he's constantly reminded of God's faithfulness, of His timing, of His provision. Well, I want to challenge each and every single one of us in the season of waiting, in the season of uncertainty. What could you name? What could be a reminder of God's faithfulness? You might not have a son coming, but you might name something, or you might put an encouraging word on your mirror or something to remind you of God's faithfulness. I want to encourage you to do that today, because His timing is perfect and He is preparing you for that next step. And guess what? He knows exactly what it is, and He knows exactly what you need. So in the season of waiting, let's choose to honor Him. Let's choose to trust Him. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth.